It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host, Smitty. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412 and go check out some of the links that we have in the description of each and every show. We have our year 6 of Rocking Around the 412 in the description. Over the past 5 years, we've raised over $25,000 with the help of all of you to help support children in our local 724 and 412 area codes around Christmas time, be able to provide some Christmas gifts for all of them, because Smitty and I never had to worry about where Christmas was coming from. So we have tried to give back to some of the kids in our local area, as well as last year we partnered with the East Rochester, Pennsylvania Salvation Army and adopted kids off of their angel tree. So if you want to go check out the link of that'll be in the description of all of the YouTube videos, and as well as the listening platforms. You can find it in the description there, as well as we have the Everything Custom Designs link as well. Still no hats. Smitty pointing to the hat right now. Still no hats, but you can get some sick t-shirts, hoodies. So you can also get a cooking apron, I hear. So go check that link out as well. Haley Wagner, our friend, can hook you up with some pretty sick stuff.
Yeah, we're about a month out from Trick or Treat, and I know she's doing like custom Trick or Treat bags for kids and stuff too. So I think that'd be like a cool way of, for at least the time being, pushing that stuff, because that's obviously going to be like a big thing, seasonal stuff. We'll see if she comes up with something for like Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't know. Christmas could be stockings. I don't know about
that'd be cool.
Thanksgiving, but we'll see what she does. But yeah, either way, we need to get on the whole hats thing. I know it's a separate machine. Don't care. That sounds like an excuse and a you problem, Haley. What's not a her problem, and is what is very much a Pittsburgh Steelers problem, is the performance that they put out on the field in their home season opener on Sunday. So like the first word for me that comes to mind, I know they were bad. We're going to get into that like in every facet, but even more than that, flat. Like how is this the first time you've got to open the season at home since 2014, almost a full decade since you opened the season at home? And that's the performance you have. Like, where's the juice? Where's the enthusiasm? I just didn't feel it at all from like the moment that I walked into that stadium. And by the way, shout out to 49ers fans, because they showed out in this one. I mean, they had a "Let's Go Niners" chant going on in the fourth quarter of this game, but even from the start to finish, I feel like it was dominated not just by the football team, but also the crowd. I got to give them a cap tip for that. We will get into the game, I'm sure, a ton, but yeah, first and foremost, more so than bad, the first thing I thought of was just flat. Like, there was just a level of excitement that I expected after the preseason and just transitioning the way they like building off of that first year of Kenny Pickett, 7-2 in the last 9 games. Like I said, a pretty much flawless preseason. There was just a level of expectation there that I had for this one that they didn't meet. So we can talk about the football game, but even more so than that, just
I mean, that was a Kendall Jenner level of flat. You know what I'm saying? I think that. Sorry.
What the?
Sorry, I had to. I just had to relate it to something, you know. But I think that this performance, I agree with you. I felt like outside of specific players, and mainly like when I think of like players that weren't coming out
like
flat,
four of them.
like TJ. For example, comes out, he's definitely not flat, but especially like offensively, it just felt like very lackluster, kind of just more we're just going through the motions than we're actually going to drive down the field. And not only was that seen, I feel like the flatness was felt through the execution of some of the plays, but also I felt like the play calling versus like what we saw in the preseason to what we saw on Sunday was different as well. And it just doesn't seem as aggressive as they seem in the preseason. Now, I understand that preseason, regular season, totally different dynamic. And I don't think that there was like this vast difference in between the two, but I just felt like overall, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you just had no energy. Like you had nothing going. And part of that is execution. Like when you do get those big plays, that helps bring some energy to your offense. But it just felt like from drive one, they just had nothing going for them in the motivation and in the momentum department. It was very weird feeling. And I don't know, like you were in the stadium, so you could speak to it better than I could. Like, what was the energy like just from the fan base taking the whole team out of it? What was it like just in the stadium from a fan base? I mean, this is, like you said, this is the first time since 2014 the Steelers have opened up at home. You would think that would be a big deal, but was it a flat in the stadium outside of the team?
I thought it just felt like a typical home game. And that's why I think I say I was expecting more. It's not like I don't think it was a letdown, at least from the Steelers fans that were in the stadium. I think the letdown part of it for me was that there was that many 49ers fans there to begin with, and that it just felt like any regular season game to me. Like, it didn't feel like a home opener. It didn't feel like the first time they've gotten to open up at home in almost a decade. It just felt like another game at home. And that's why I say there was like a level of disappointment for me in terms of the atmosphere. Then, we can start to get into this a little bit. Like, I was thrown off basically immediately. They win the coin toss and want the ball. I'm like, this is totally different from like the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, okay,
Absolutely.
going to be feeling really good about where the offense is if they want the ball. Like, they're trying to make a statement right now. First play, a little 6-yard. I don't know if it was a curl or a dig. I'd have to go back and look, but it was something to Pickens, gained 6 yards on first down. And I actually, even though they didn't get a first down around the first play, the reason I was encouraged by that is because I was like, oh man, George Pickens is running something other than a go route. So I was, and that's typically like a Diontae Johnson route right there that we're seeing them get the ball to George Pickens on the first play. So I was encouraged just right off the bat from that. And then we see, and I'm not even somebody that hates like the jet sweep stuff. We've talked about it. Like, it's a play they averaged over 6 yards per play on last year. There's no necessarily reason to hate it. Now you can say the weight, the timing of them maybe. And this definitely felt like a time where it's like, why? Like, what are we trying to do right now? Get the ball into Calvin Austin's hands on the second play of the game on this little pop pass, jet sweep type play. And then it just kills the drive. Third down. And I don't know that it would have mattered because we're talking about, you see how things played out from that point on. Then you got a bad punt from Presley Harvin, which was another theme of this game. He was really bad. Tomlin called him out by name. He was the only one, I think, by name really that Tomlin called out. But I think the 49ers started in plus territory way too many times in this game. And I think that was a product of the offense, obviously not moving the ball, tons of 3-and-outs, but also Presley Harvin not being able to flip the field. And the defense wasn't very good either. Like, this was a first-class show in how to not play complimentary football. Like, it was the complete opposite of everything that you want to do. They were like the opposite of a complete football team. Everything that could have went wrong in this game basically did. And I guess the only question that we have coming out of it, other than the injuries, and we'll get into that, is Kenny was obviously, to me, the worst player on the field. I think he was a bigger issue than Matt Canada was. People are talking about like the offensive coordinator and stuff. I think that's low-hanging fruit for this at this point for Steelers fans. Kenny was the worst player on the field on Sunday. If you're disputing that, I think that you are really looking for, you're just like, it's hopium. And I think that you're in denial on the way that it actually was on Sunday. But I guess the question becomes, is that a product of the 49ers defense or what? Because I'm just so confused about it, because it's not even, there were obviously times where Kenny looked bad last year as a rookie, and you would expect that. This was a completely different level of bad, and it was totally different reasons. Like, he was inaccurate. Like, the accuracy is the big thing for him. If he's not going to be accurate, then the lack of physical tools that he has, he can't make up for it if he's going to be inaccurate. So that was really concerning to me. I just didn't think he was going through progressions well. There were times where, the Diontae Johnson, the first interception he threw where Diontae falls down, obviously it's unfortunate Diontae falls down. If that doesn't happen, it's probably not a pick, but it's still a really bad decision by Kenny. That's his first read of the progression, works through them all, and then comes back to the first guy. That typically isn't going to go well, and then throws it. Diontae falls down, and it's a pick. I think that everything that he did in this game was just bad. Like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, when you throw 40 sometimes, there's going to be throws that he made that were good, and some things he did well.
Right.
But in totality, this was, in my opinion, the worst game he's had as a pro, and maybe overall, and I had this conversation with Alan, maybe overall, even including college, because the only other one that comes to mind is when he had like 8 yards versus Clemson, but the talent discrepancy of those teams was ridiculous. Like that's not the case on an NFL Sunday.
That's the thing. I was about to say, without hyperbole, I have watched a lot of Kenny Pickett in my day. I watched every game of him at Pitt, and I was at that game where he threw for 8 yards against Clemson in the 2018 ACC championship. And I believe that was the worst game I've ever watched Kenny play. He was bad, and I don't think that his box score does it justice for how bad he actually was. Because when you look at it just on the surface, 31 of 46, 232 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. I genuinely don't think that shows how bad Kenny was on Sunday, because it is
also
past.
Fred Warner dropped a 3rd interception. And that was the easiest one that he threw. Like it was literally right into his chest.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think it shows how bad he was, because what you can't see on the box score is what you were talking about, like with that Diontae Johnson slipping and he throws the pick. Like that play should have never happened. That read should have never been thrown to, and yet it was. And we saw that throughout the entire game, like questionable decisions. Like I think back to the one play that was an incomplete pass in the end zone where I watched that play over and over again, and I'm still not sure who he was throwing to. I mean, the Steelers had the ball on around like the 15-yard line, I think. He throws it into the end zone. I'm like, I have no idea where this is going to. There's guys in the area, but there's no clear, like, this is who he was targeting. I have no idea what it was. The decision
Which one was that?
Kenny was. I'm trying to think of what it was. It was in the.
I was wondering if it was the 4 where they went for it on 4th down, but that was from the 8, and they ran 4 verts from the 8-yard line, which is insane.
I know he threw it over the middle. That's what that's my best memory of it. I don't know the actual situation. I can't remember the situation, but I know he threw it over the middle. There were some Steelers in the area, but there was also several defenders. It was just very confusing to me as to what the decision-making process was. And that's the main thing that was so un-Kenny Pickett-like, I felt like, is that normally, like, he can make mistakes, and he has in the past, but you didn't see all of the mental errors that he was making in previous games like you did on Sunday. And so that's where the hyperbole is. There's no hyperbole for me. Like, this is his worst game that I've ever seen him play at the college or NFL level, because his decision making, the progressions that he was making, but then making decisions on top of those progressions were just bad. I think he was also. Yes, this is the play. If you're watching on YouTube,
is it? Okay. So this is the one I'm talking about. They ran 4 verts on. Oh wait, why is it not?
They ran 4 verticals, and Kenny gets the ball and immediately is throwing it over the middle. I'm not sure. Like, is that supposed to go to Freiermuth? Because
what's funny is if he waits longer, and I know that he can't, like you're talking, Jalen Warren comes out of the backfield on this. It's like a delayed, like he's supposed to show that he's a blocker and then come out of the backfield.
Right.
Yeah. He could have hit him, and maybe it's a touchdown because this linebacker moves off of him. But yeah.
And speaking of that, I feel like there were like a couple more plays throughout this game where Kenny was making mistakes of either getting out of the pocket too early before he needs to. It's like he felt phantom pressure when he didn't have to move, or he was throwing the ball before and getting rid of the ball too quickly whenever he could have held on to it for a couple more seconds and another guy could have been open. I feel like when you saw like the all 22 footage, there were several times throughout this game where that happened. And so there is, without a doubt, no doubt in my mind, this is the worst game that Kenny has ever played. And like you said, the people who are blaming Matt Canada over Kenny Pickett, I feel like that's being a Kenny Pickett apologist right now. And believe me, I am a huge Kenny supporter, but this is not on Matt Canada. Sure, he has his share of the blame just like everybody does, but this is nothing different than what we've seen in Matt Canada's past games. Like there's no difference to it. And we've seen this offense be able to be executed. We saw it at the end of last season with Kenny Pickett. And I see, like, looking at the pass charts from Kenny on Sunday, there's no difference. It's just they didn't execute anything. And starting with Kenny Pickett, he was the worst one on the field And that is the main thing that needs to change for the Steelers going into next week, because if this is the Kenny that you're going to get, and what is the main difference? Like, what from what we saw in the preseason to week 1 against San Francisco, like, is it playing the 49ers defense? Like, I just can't come up with anything that makes you that mental switch of the hesitancy or the decision making. Like, that is just night and day from what we saw in the 3 games that we saw him in the preseason to what we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so weird to me and so confusing. It's like, I mean, the follow-up question here that I want to say is, do you have hope that he's going to be able to play better on Monday night and turn it around? It's just, how do you have a yes or no answer to that when you don't even know what went wrong in this game? Like, you don't know what the reason was that happened, because it's just so uncharacteristic of him. Like, if he were to have played bad because he's trying to fit the ball into tight windows or whatever, and they're trying to take shots down the field, or the offensive line is totally getting caved in and he's taking a bunch of sacks or something like that, then it's a different conversation. But if he's kept relatively clean, and even when he has good pockets, he's just flat out missing guys by, like, not even when we say Kenny's accurate, it's not even necessarily like fitting the ball into tight windows and sticking it right on guys' hands, but he's able to put it on a receiver. He's missing guys by like 3 yards. I mean, there's a play to Diontae Johnson.
That should have been a touchdown.
It's an easy 6. Yeah, it's a layup for any NFL quarterback, really, or it should be NFL quarterback. Totally
threw it behind him.
Yeah, totally misses him. There's another one to Diontae trying to rip the ball up the seam, misses him by a good 5 yards. Like, high too. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know if you even have an answer on this, because I certainly don't. I don't know what to think about. Like, I would like to think that there's no way he could be as bad as he was this week, but is there reason to think that he's going to improve to the level of what he looked like in the preseason? Like, what version of Kenny Pickett do you think we're going to get on Monday night? And keep in mind too, we're about to talk about the fact that he's not going to have Diontae Johnson.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. The one thing I will say about Kenny is he's taking his lumps in stride, and whenever he makes, like, I think about the early parts of the last season when Kenny was coming in, like that Eagles game, the Miami game, throughout that season, we saw the mistakes that Kenny was making, and Kenny took those very seriously, and he put in the work to improve upon those. And so, yeah, it's a shock that Kenny regressed this much in game 1 from what we saw, not only just in this preseason, but what we saw him end the season with last season. But that is what's going to give me some belief, some hopium, I guess, if you want to call it that he'll improve on Monday night against the Browns. Is that, like, Kenny is somebody who is going to look at this, see what went wrong, and really study what to improve upon. And because we've seen that in the past. I mean, we saw it in college. We saw it just his rookie season last year, that he wants to improve upon his mistakes, and he's going to grind to be able to do so. So that is, to me, would be the one thing that sticks out. Not even necessarily just anything like trait-wise that I think could be different, just his mentality that he's going to have after this game. I feel like he's going to be the hardest working guy in practice this week, because he's going to look at the film, and I know Kenny Pickett, which I don't, but if I know Kenny Pickett, he's going to say, like, I sucked and I need to improve upon this.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time believing he's not himself thinking he's the biggest reason they lost this football game. I know that the defense gave up 30 points, but again, they were in pretty bad position the entire time.
Listen, I was describing this to somebody, and I'm like, I can see multiple individuals where I can be like, you had a terrible game defensively. But when it comes to the unit as a whole, how much blame can I really put on them when they were on the field the majority of the time? Like, individual players, I can put blame on for bad plays and bad drives or whatever. But, like, the entire series as a whole, or the entire defense as a whole, it's hard for me to place a ton of blame on them giving up what they did. Because they were on the field like nonstop. The Steelers had several, like, the first 3 drives of the Steelers were 3 and outs. It might even be the first 4 drives. And so, yeah, how much blame are you going to put on your defense whenever your offense is only on the field for a minute and a half?
That, like, always seems to be the case. Like, the defense plays terrible, but the offense was so bad, it's like hard to evaluate how bad they actually were. I do think the defense was also really bad though in this game. Like
I
outside
think
of
they were
TJ
bad.
Watt, yeah, outside of TJ Watt and like a little bit of Keannu Benton, I don't really even know what to take away from this game positively for the defense. I thought like Minka, I mean, he was asked to play a lot of slot corner in this game. Didn't really notice him, and like he's a guy that, like, typically for defensive backs, you say that's like a good thing. That's mainly a corner thing, I guess, though. But like Minka's normally noticeable in some fashion. This is probably his most unnoticeable game as a Steeler. I know Alex Highsmith had a couple tackles for loss, and he was also going against Trent Williams, so like it's almost like a mulligan for him. But I would
Yeah.
say outside of TJ, I really don't know. Again, limited snaps for Keannu Benton. I thought he was pretty good in his role. What's take away? Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson were both awful. Keanu Neal, DeMonte KZ,
Agreed.
they were both awful. The linebackers were bad.
I thought Landon Roberts looked good early on, like in the first quarter, but
He had a
then
couple
from
run
then on out,
stuffs. Yeah.
from then on
He had a
out,
couple run
it
stuffs,
went
but
down.
he also got put in some spots where, like, okay, there was a sequence, 3rd and 1, McCaffrey tries to jump over the pile and gets stopped, and then immediately the 49ers get that mismatch where Purdy rolls out and has Kittle matched up with a Landon Roberts and hits him to get the 1 yard and picks up an additional 9. So I think that they did a nice job of diagnosing and looking for mismatches there. But yeah, outside of TJ, I thought the defense was bad too.
Well, listen, the defense didn't do any of my keys to the game.
Yeah,
and
we'll
you're
try.
off,
Maybe you'll be able to get us back on track offensively and me defensively. Maybe that's the way it's going to go. But
because I mean, my defensive keys were, first off, you had to limit the chunk plays. That didn't happen. Second, I thought you had to. I don't even know what my second one. I know one of them was limiting Christian McCaffrey as much as you can. Not that you were going to do so entirely, but just
he had like the second most yards they've ever given up in a season opener. So that didn't happen.
Yeah, so that didn't happen. Oh, and my third one was getting to the quarterback, creating pressure on Brock Purdy to make him uncomfortable and help out the back end of your defense. I mean, they got pressure on him, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously TJ having 3 sacks, they got home a couple times on him. I didn't feel like there was any consistency with the pressure though, and I also, with how quick he gets the ball out, I think it's relatively tough to get pressure on him to begin with. I think that you have to, like, first and foremost, if you're going to get pressure on him, it's going to be because you stop that run game first, and he's having to drop back a little bit, get into some different drops, as opposed to just being able to snap and rip it and get the ball to guys quick in space. But yeah, and then offensively, the things that I said were Darnell Washington, 12 personnel. I do think he was one of the brighter spots on the team, like him, TJ, Anthony McFarland in the return game, and then Calvin Austin getting his feet wet and not looking like totally out of place were the only positive things that I took away from this one. So Darnell Washington did look good as a blocker. There's a clip of him that's gone around of him putting Nick Bosa in the dirt. Anytime you can do that as a rookie against the reigning defensive player of the year and highest paid non-quarterback, that's pretty good. The pick your poison with Diontae and George Pickens obviously didn't work. I mean, that's, again, more of a product of the quarterback. I cannot believe that wasn't something that they were able to attack in this game, though. I mean, San Fran's corner room, again, outside of Charvarius Ward, who did have an interception in this game, it's not a good group. Like, again, I know that the pass rush, that front 7 is going to be able to make up for it a little bit. But, man, more so than they did, they should have been able to attack those matchups.
Honestly, I'll say part of that was probably Kenny making the cornerbacks look better than they actually were because of the decisions that he was making. I mean,
definitely.
I would blame that more on not taking advantage of those matchups, more on just the decision making of Kenny more than anything.
I don't know how those guys graded out per pro Football Focus or anything like that. But I don't feel like those guys were like deflecting a bunch of passes. Like, I don't think they were contesting a ton. Like, I just don't even feel like the football was getting close to the receiver.
You don't need to deflect a pass that isn't going to touch anybody.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. One of those guys, Diontae Johnson, though, injured in this game, hamstring injury is going to keep him out multiple weeks. Which the timeline is interesting because multiple weeks, Tomlin's only rolled him out for this upcoming week. But we got Cleveland, the Las Vegas Raiders, Houston Texans, the Ravens, and then you have the bye. If he doesn't say it is a few and not a couple weeks, like say, let's go based off the words used here and say it is a few, which would mean 3 games, then would you bring him back even for that Ravens game? Or because they have the bye the following week, like how do you think the Steelers handle him? And then the second part of this, there's a lot of people within Steelers Nation that don't appreciate Diontae Johnson. They don't have a solution within their offense. It's going to be Calvin Austin that sees the jump in playing time. He doesn't replicate that skill set at all. I think people are really going to miss what Diontae Johnson brings to the field, even when he's not the one getting the ball, which is his ability to create for other guys.
Yeah, and I feel like they're going to miss that crisp route running. They're going to miss somebody that can get open with ease. And as far as his health goes, if we're getting into that Ravens game and he's not 100% healthy, then I would just hold him out again. And this is all very situational. We have no idea what the next few games are going to look like.
Could it depend on where the team's at? Like, say they lose to Cleveland, but then win the next 2.
Yeah, that could change things. But I tend to say that if he's not 100% healthy, I wouldn't mess with it. I don't want him to re-aggravate it. Is the main thing I would look at. I think that the bigger time off would be pretty valuable for healing up that hamstring, because hamstrings that's just something that's so finicky. Like one play you could re-aggravate it and you're out another like 4 weeks. So I personally would probably hold him out unless he's like 100% cleared, like he's not going to re-aggravate this injury, which you can't guarantee, but like you can play at 100% and feel that.
Yeah. I think he's so integral to what they want to do. Like if he can go, he's going to have to go. And maybe I would feel differently if, they do rattle off wins here against Cleveland, Vegas, and Houston, and they're 3-1 before the Ravens, and then that bye week. I just feel like, and they're not going, like, if he can go, if he's 100%, then he's going to go. But I don't think he will unless he is. Like, I don't even think it's a question. Like, if he plays, it's because he is 100%. I don't think that they would mess with it otherwise. So if we see him out there, whenever that is, I'm assuming it's because he's back completely full health, been cleared, and they don't feel like there's a chance, obviously, that he could re-aggravate all, especially with hamstrings. Like, I remember, this is me trying to put myself into the shoes now of a professional athlete. I pulled my hamstring playing softball. Okay. Not on a football field like Diontae Johnson playing softball. I ended up like re-pulling it 2 times within the next 2 months. Like once you pull that hamstring once, it keeps going.
Yeah.
So they really got to be careful with this. It's so tricky. These soft tissue things, they're so annoying. But he's definitely going to be missed within that offense. And I have no clue what the offensive game plan is going to be here versus Cleveland, who just shut down the Cincinnati Bengals in a much, in my opinion, better receiving core. I think the potential's certainly there with Pittsburgh, but as of right now, I mean, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, who had a goose egg, 0 receptions on 8 targets for T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I mean, that's to me as good of a group as there is in the NFL. And Cleveland with Martin Emerson, with Denzel Ward, and with Greg Newsome held those guys in check. So very tall task for the Pittsburgh Steelers receivers. And again, Kenny Pickett to get back on track in this one, because you're talking about the Steelers who probably couldn't be lower right now, and Cleveland who's riding an absolute high.
Yeah, and I'll say that you mentioned Calvin Austin. His snaps are going to be elevated from this, and he'll benefit from this injury. I think that Pat Freiermuth may also benefit from this, just getting the targets. But I feel like George Pickens and Allen Robinson are going to hurt from it because there's not going to be that threat of Diontae Johnson on the field, so those two can get focused on more.
George is going to see the double teams, I think. I think he's going to see Denzel Ward and then a safety over top. So I would anticipate that happening. He's going to have to be able to win those matchups sometimes, though, in order to create for other guys. So we're really about to find, the people that think that he is the number one, even when Diontae Johnson's out there, his time's now to go and prove it. But yeah, the Pat Freiermuth thing is interesting too, because I feel like it's the same conversation that we had last year when we traded Chase Claypool, where it's like, who's going to be the big beneficiary here? I do agree. Like, I already thought we were going to see a good amount of Darnell Washington in a game with, these elite edge rushers like Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith that they have on the other side in Cleveland. But now, especially without Diontae Johnson, I think that's the case because I think Allen Robinson's going to shift to the outside receiver. You're going to see Calvin Austin play some slot, but I think Pat Freiermuth is going to be like the actual slot receiver, number one option.
You might see some situations where they just say screw it and put him in the slot. He's not leaving from the line. He's actually just standing out there. And maybe that's a situation where you have another tight end coming to block like Washington. So I think that'll be interesting to see how the receiving room handles this, because I mean this is a true test, because like you and I both know, and a lot of Steeler fans both know, but a lot of Steeler fans don't agree that like Diontae Johnson is still wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh. So they lost their wide receiver 1 in our opinion. So it's that's unfortunate. It's going to be an even tougher task for the offense moving forward.
They also lost their defensive captain, one of their 2 defensive captains, but the most tenured guy, Cam Heyward here, 8 weeks potentially having groin surgery. This, I mean, for a team that was already, they got gashed in the run game again. I mean, this is going on a few years now where this team has had trouble stopping the run. And now you lose Cam Heyward as well, not to mention what he offers as a pass rusher. This guy's gotten better. He's been better in his 30s than he was in his late 20s. So it goes without saying that his absence is going to be noticeable. I feel like with the defensive line depth they've built up, they're probably better equipped to handle this loss this year to Cam than they were last year to TJ. When you're talking about losing one of those 2 guys they have each of the last 2 years after the opener, which is just so frustrating and annoying. The plan to me, and I don't know that this is what the Steelers are going to do. I don't necessarily think it will, because I don't know that they want to throw a rookie into the fire, would be to play Keannu Benton at 3-tech in Cam's spot, have him be the starter, give Fehoko a helmet, and let him kind of be able to eat those double teams in the middle to have your linebackers play a little bit more clean, because the linebackers, like I said, with lack of a better word, they sucked. They were awful on Sunday. And I think a big part of that is similarly to last year. Obviously, there's the communication aspect of things, but also like they weren't they can't take on these pulling guards or guys that are climbing to the second level. Like Fehoko can hopefully keep these guys clean, and against Nick Chubb, just let them focus on him and coming downhill. So that to me would be the plan. But what I think it's going to be is like a lot of the Marvin Leal, I think Armin Watts maybe gets a helmet too. Maybe Isaiah Loudermilk, but I would be trial by fire with Keannu Benton, giving him a ton of snaps.
I mean, you drafted him in the second round for a reason, right? I feel like you should play him. I think he has the pedigree for it. I agree with you. I would play Keannu Benton, and whether they want to bring it and give Fehoko a hat and put him at 0, I think that Keannu Benton should get the first looks at playing that 3 technique and just taking over for Cam Heyward's spot. I think that it would be a good test for a rookie, and some of these guys, they're going to play well by getting more playing time. So I feel like when you get those snaps and you get that in-game experience, that can be very valuable to these young players. And with someone as talented as we think Keannu Benton is, I think he could excel in this role with more snaps. And so I agree with you that that's what I would do as far as a plan. But I also agree with you where I think it's going to be more like a committee of multiple guys going in on the defensive line. Not necessarily just Keannu Benton, but you're going to see multiple guys filling in to make up for that role. Kind of similar to what we've seen other positions do in the past when someone of that level has gone out. It's just unfortunate, and it's so unlucky. And I get it. Like, the Steelers aren't the only team to suffer injuries. Like, totally not. I mean, look at what happened to the Jets just last night. But I mean, back-to-back years, you're losing someone like the 2 best players in back-to-back years have a serious injury on your defensive front. I mean, that's just unfortunate for the Steelers defense as a whole. Last year was TJ, this year is Cam. I mean, we were talking about how valuable Cam was last week and how big of a game we thought he was going to have against the 49ers. Yeah. But even at his age, he's still one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. He's one of the best defensive players on the Steelers, and he's just so valuable, not only just on the field, but in that locker room. So that's something that's going to be missed not just for on-field performance, but you're missing a leader in the locker room now. And obviously he's going to be on the field still, I would anticipate, but it's just not going to be quite the same that it would be when he's dressed in pads.
So I wanted to pull this up real quick. If you're watching on YouTube, I have it on the screen. We mentioned like 0 tech and 3 tech, and some people might be like, what are they talking about here? That's just where we're talking about defensive linemen lining up. So as you can see, 0 tech plays right over the center. And then as you start to go out towards the tackles, and then Y is an inline tight end in this scenario. So 0 tech out to 7. 7 is obviously like where TJ would be playing. Keannu Benton, I think the reason the Steelers liked him so much, he could play from 0 probably all the way out to 5, to be quite honest with you, for sure out to 4. But I don't know that we're going to see him play out past 3 this year. Yeah, it is interesting just because we've seen Cam actually not that great playing in a 0 tech or even 1 tech. Like he's obviously his best as a 3 tech. If Keanu's able to do it, they might actually have even more of a versatile player there than what Cam offers them. Obviously not to the quality that he plays at 3 tech. But yeah, I want to pull this graphic up just to show you guys exactly what we're talking about when we say 0 tech and 3 tech and stuff like that. So, I would assume we see Fehoko as that 0 tech, as you guys can see on the screen. That's pretty much exclusively what he is. He's not going to give you anything against the pass either. Like he's not going to give you any pass rush juice.
He's going to swallow everything up inside. That's what he's built to do.
And then you'll see Benton, somewhere between that 2I and 3, I would assume. So I hope he sees an increase in snaps for sure. I think he's going to have to. I don't know what exactly the plan is there. And again, when you talk about Cam Heyward for the defense, Diontae Johnson for the offense, I actually don't know which one is more important, to be quite honest with you. And I say that because I trust more what Omar Khan built up with the defensive line depth than I do what else is in that receiver room right now. At least from like the different flavors that you have. Like, again, you don't have anything close to Diontae Johnson's skill set within that receiver room without him. I think it's a toss-up, and I also think you're talking about a top 2 or 3 player from each side as well that's going to be missing for at least the next few weeks.
Absolutely. I think I will lean Diontae Johnson, and maybe that is just a bias from what I saw from the offense in week 1. I think that the Steelers are more equipped to deal with a Cam Heyward injury than they are a Diontae Johnson injury. And I say that because it's kind of like what you were saying, like the Steelers in-house do not have somebody that is going to replicate what Diontae Johnson does. And I don't think that there's anybody better to help out a quarterback that struggled in week 1 than someone who can get open so easily for you in week 2. But you're not going to have that. Like nobody on the Steelers as of right now can get open like Diontae could, and that makes easy passes and builds more confidence for your quarterback. Kenny's going to be missing that, and now a lot of it could be more contested catches and be more difficult on the quarterback. That's why I would lean Diontae, but either way, I mean, like you said, you're missing a top 2 to 3 player on either side of the ball. It's a crappy situation to be in just after 1 game of this season.
And they came into the season relatively healthy. I mean, outside of Corey Trice Jr. being out for the year, and then Larry Ogunjobi dealing with the foot thing, like right up, we didn't even know if he was going to play on Sunday. They were healthy coming into the season. And then in 1 game, you lose Diontae Johnson and Cam Heyward for multiple weeks. And then Chuk suffered a concussion late. Pat Freiermuth's dealing with the chest. James Daniels and Miles Boykin wearing boots. Like, what the heck, man? Not only did they lose on the scoreboard, they just got legitimately beat up in this game, like bullied start to finish by the 49ers. So again, the question becomes, can they get back on track in week 2 against the Browns? I'll be quite honest with you. This just has one of those feelings of a game where they have no business winning, but Mike Tomlin will somehow find a way. Let's talk about some stats here before we give our predictions, because I just saw my guy, Dale Lawley, put this out there. The Steelers have won 20 straight games on Monday night at home. Their last loss on Monday Night Football at home came on October 14th, 1991 against the New York Giants. There is that. There's also the fact that somebody just sent this to me recently too. Mike Tomlin as the head coach of the Steelers following a loss of at least 20 points is 10-2. That .833 winning percentage is the highest in the NFL over that span.
And another crazy stat, maybe not as positive as those two are, but another crazy stat is this is the first time since 1989 that the Steelers are an underdog at home versus Cleveland Browns.
And they were an underdog in week 1 too. So they start out back-to-back home dogs. I'll start. I think I had you start last time. So I'll start. We're going to have our 3 keys still. We'll put those out Friday and Saturday of this week. So look forward to those. My prediction for this game, I just said it. It just feels like the Steelers are going to somehow find a way, even though if you look at it on paper, there's no reason they should win this one. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I do think that the Steelers show some signs offensively. They're not going to be as bad, I don't think, as what we saw on Sunday. I'm not ready to hit the panic button completely in terms of Kenny Pickett himself. I do think that there are some worries when you talk about the injuries are what I'm more worried about than anything. Like, the result of that game was whatever to me, but it's really the way that Kenny looked and the injuries that came out of it that are more worrisome. So hopefully Kenny can answer some of those questions on Monday night. And the injuries, unfortunately, there's really nothing you can do. You got to just try to mitigate those losses. I'm going to say the Steelers win this one. It's going to be a weird score too. I'm going to say 22-17 Steelers.
Okay. That is a weird score. 22. I'll say the Steelers win as well. And I will say this too. I was thinking about this, and I was talking about this with my buddy.
People might say I'm a homer. I picked San Fran week 1, so let's put that to bed.
I'm the one that picked the Steelers week 1, and I also picked them to go like 12-5. I'm not feeling good after week 1. However, I'm going to pick the Steelers to win in week 2, and part of the reason is because the last couple seasons we've heard preseason how bad the Steelers were going to be, and then they happened to beat the Bengals and they happened to beat the Bills in back-to-back seasons on the first game of the season, teams they had no business beating. And then this offseason and this preseason, we heard how good the Steelers are, and they actually absolutely get their teeth kicked in. So I'm thinking it's going to be a little opposite of the beginnings of the seasons like we've had from the past couple seasons. So they got their teeth kicked in. They're going to come back with a win that they shouldn't win at home. I'm going to say that the Steelers win this one 17-13. I agree with you. It is going to be a low-scoring game. I feel like it's going to be a defensive dogfight, and the Steelers are going to find a way to win this one.
If they can hold Cleveland to 13 points without Cam Heyward, I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have about this defense next week. So, yeah, that would be great. But I do think there has to be some resolve here from that. Maybe they needed kicked in the teeth. Like, to your point, they probably had more hype coming in from the outside than they have the last, man.
They heard nothing but how good they are for multiple weeks after this preseason, including a 2-week break from the end of the preseason to the start of the regular season. They heard nothing about how good the Steelers are going to be, and then they absolutely got rocked. I think that could be a good thing moving forward for the Steelers. Again, that might be a shot in the arm of hopium from my part, but I think that it's not necessarily always a bad thing from a mentality standpoint to lose a game.
Yeah. And obviously the way that they lost was embarrassing, but that's a really good 49ers team, and that's as good of a team as they have on their entire schedule.
I mean, there may be a healthy Brock Purdy away from going to the Super Bowl last year. So,
yeah,
you never know.
Yep. All right. Well, unless you have anything else, that does it for the Steelers show. Look forward to seeing what the people think. So comment down below what your predictions are for Sunday. Let us know where you're at on the panic meter. Right now, I would say I'm probably at about a 4 or 5. And again, that's mainly due to the 2 injuries that they suffered that are going to be multiple weeks as opposed to just the performance on Sunday. Like, to me, that loss is whatever. It's really about how Kenny looked, and it's really about those 2 injuries. So I'd say I'm probably about a 4 or 5 out of 10 on the panic meter. You guys let us know where you're at down below. Let us know how you feel about the game on Monday night against the Browns, as well as anything else that we talked about. What else did we talk about? I don't know if there was really anything else besides. Oh, who do you guys think? So wide receiver wise, who do you think sees the bulk of targets in the absence of Diontae Johnson, and how would the Steelers look to, in some form or fashion, try to replace the loss of Cam Heyward for 8 weeks, up to 8 weeks? Man, it's gonna be tough. All right, well, that does it for the Steelers show. Again, check out the description. We have Rocking Around the 412 year 6 going on. We raised $25,000 the first 5 years of doing so. Every year we run this Christmas mission to give back to kids in the 724 and 412 area codes. Tyler and I never had to worry about where Christmas was coming from growing up, so that was kind of the meat and potatoes of why we wanted to start the Christmas mission to begin with. And last year it became a little bit more meaningful to us. We lost our friend Dalton, and in his name, thanks to his girlfriend Kaylee and their daughter Isla, we started partnering with the East Rochester Angel Tree and Salvation Army and their Angel Tree to give as many kids off of that Angel Tree the Christmas that they deserve as well. So it's been great being a part of that too. I'm so happy that Kaylee and Isla are going to be part of it moving forward. And yeah, I mean, it's only September right now, but man, look how quickly it got from June to September. These 3-month periods, especially now the football's going on, it's going to fly by. So it'll be Christmas before we know it. Hopefully at that point, we got some more answers on the Steelers team and they're in contention at that point. But also, if you guys donate to the cause, you'll be eligible to win some prizes. And I'm sure a lot of those will be Steelers related. So check that out. Check out Everything Custom Designs by our friend Haley Wagner. Unless you want a hat, go somewhere else. But if you want a t-shirt, Halloween's right around the corner, so a custom trick-or-treat bag for your kid, a lot of other clothing, different stuff. Go check it out. She has an Etsy shop or a Facebook page. Both of those are going to be in the description. Other than that, for Tyler, for Smitty, be sure to check out one of our other shows that is popping up on the screen somewhere right about now, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.